I knew something was wrong the moment my son-in-law walked through the front door and didn't take off his boots. It's a small thing, I know that, but in this house, in this home that my late husband Reginald and I built over 34 years in Oakville, Ontario, you take off your boots at the door. Everyone does. The neighbors do it. The grandchildren do it. Even the plumber who came last February to fix the pipe under the kitchen sink. He did it without being asked. It's just what you do. My son-in-law tracked mud across the hallway tiles I had mopped that same morning, walked straight into the kitchen, opened my refrigerator, and said, without looking at me, "There's no orange juice." I was sitting at the kitchen table with my tea. I had been sitting there since 6:30, as I do every morning, watching the light come in through the window over the backyard. It was October. The maple in the corner had gone completely red, the way it does every year, and I had been thinking about Reginald, as I often do in October, because October was when he proposed to me 41 years ago on a bench by the water in Burlington. I looked at my son-in-law's boots, leaving prints on the floor, and I said, "Good morning." He closed the refrigerator. "I'll need you to pick some up when you go out." That was all. He went back down the hallway, and I heard the television come on in the living room, my living room, and I sat there with my tea, and I thought, this is how it has been for 7 months now, and somehow I have let it become normal. My daughter's name is Tamara. She is 43 years old, and she has her father's eyes and her father's stubbornness, though she would not like me to say so. She married her husband, whom I will call by his first name only, Derek, 6 years ago, in a small ceremony at a winery in Niagara-on-the-Lake. I liked him then. I want to be honest about that. I thought he was charming and capable, and I thought he made my daughter laugh in a way I hadn't seen her laugh in years. I gave them a check for $8,000 toward the wedding. I didn't mention it afterward. It wasn't a loan. It was a gift, and gifts are not meant to be tracked. The trouble started quietly, the way trouble usually does. They had been renting a condo in Mississauga. The rent went up. Derek had been between jobs. His company had restructured, he said, which I understood, and Tamara was on maternity leave with my grandson, who had just turned 1. They needed somewhere to stay for a few months, they said, just to get back on their feet, just until Derek found something new. I said yes immediately. Of course I said yes. Tamara is my daughter. My grandson is my grandson. The house has 3 bedrooms, and it is just me in it since Reginald passed. What kind of mother would say no? They arrived on a Thursday in March with 3 carloads of belongings and a large flat-screen television that Derek installed on the wall of the living room that same afternoon over the spot where Reginald's bookshelves had been. He had taken the bookshelves down without asking. He said they needed the space. I didn't say anything. It was an adjustment. I told myself it was an adjustment. By April, Derek had found a position with a logistics company in Brampton. The pay was decent. He told me so himself in a tone that suggested I should be impressed. I was glad for him. I thought, now things will settle. Now there will be a timeline. Now we will sit down and talk about what comes next. We never had that conversation. What happened instead was this. The months passed, and the arrangement became less temporary with every one of them. Derek's paychecks went toward what he called getting ahead, paying down credit card debt, he said, saving for a down payment, building their emergency fund. All reasonable things. All things that are easier, I noticed, when you are not paying rent. I want to be fair. I did not charge them rent. I had said it would be a few months, and I didn't want to go back on my word by suddenly introducing a lease. My daughter was tired. My grandson was teething. I told myself there would be time, but I began to notice other things. The grocery bill, which I had always paid myself, had quietly tripled. I shop at the Fortinos near me, and I know what my groceries cost, because I have been buying them for 35 years. Suddenly there were items I had never purchased, expensive cuts of meat, a particular brand of sparkling water Derek preferred, snacks and prepared foods, that my daughter said made the evenings easier. I didn't complain. I put it through on my card. My gas and hydro bills went up. Understandable, 3 more people in the house. I accepted that. Then there was the matter of the credit card. Reginald and I had always kept a shared household card with a modest limit, which I had continued to use after he passed for things like appliances and home repairs. Tamara knew about it. She had seen me use it for years. One afternoon in June, I went to use it at Canadian Tire to buy a new garden hose and a bag of topsoil, and the transaction was declined. I stood there at the counter, certain it was a mistake. I tried again. Declined. I called the number on the back of the card from the parking lot. The customer service representative told me, in a careful voice, that the card had reached its limit. I said that wasn't possible. She said it was. When I got home and pulled up the statement online, I sat at my kitchen table for a very long time without moving. There were charges I didn't recognize. A home goods store in Streetsville. I had never been there. A restaurant in Port Credit. $312 for dinner on a Tuesday evening in May when I had been at my book club and my daughter had told me they were staying in. Charges at a clothing store. Charges at an electronics retailer, and in July, I had to read it twice. A charge for $1,840 to a furniture company in Burlington. I had not bought furniture. I sat with that statement for a long time. I thought about how to bring it up. I rehearsed the words in my head the way you rehearse difficult conversations when you are 67 years old and you have been raised to keep the peace. That evening, I made dinner, roast chicken, the kind I have made for 40 years, the kind Tamara grew up on. We ate together at the table, the 4 of us. My grandson was in his high chair, throwing pieces of bread on the floor. Derek was on his phone. Tamara was cutting up food into small pieces and sliding them across the tray. I said, "I got a call from the credit card company today." Neither of them looked up immediately. I said, "The card is at its limit. There are some charges on it I don't recognize." Tamara put down her fork. She looked at Derek. Derek looked at me with an expression I can only describe as the look of someone calculating how much I knew. Then he said, "We were going to tell you. We needed a few things for the baby's room, and the couch in the basement was broken, so we replaced it. We'll pay you back once we're more settled." I looked at him for a moment. I said, "You charged $1,840 to my card without asking me." He said, "We're living here too, you know. We needed to be comfortable." I looked at my daughter. She looked at her plate. I didn't raise my voice. I am not someone who raises her voice. I excused myself from the table, went to my bedroom, sat on the edge of my bed, and put my hands in my lap. The house was quiet except for the sound of my grandson babbling and the television Derek had turned on in the living room before the plates were even cleared. I thought about Reginald. I thought about the 34 years we had spent filling this house. Every piece of furniture chosen carefully, every repair done properly, every bill paid on time. I thought about the RRSP we had built together over decades and the TFSA I had continued to contribute to after he was gone, because I was determined not to become a burden on anyone. I thought about what it meant that my card had been used for $1,840 worth of furniture by someone who was living in my house for free and had not once asked me how I was managing. That night I could not sleep. I lay in the dark and I listened to the sounds of my house, the furnace cycling, the creak of the hallway floor, the occasional soft noise from my grandson's room. And I thought about the word comfortable. We needed to be comfortable. In my house on my card, I got up at 5:30, I made tea. I sat at the kitchen table in the dark, and I watched the sky turn from black to gray to the particular pale gold that comes just before sunrise in October. The maple in the backyard was still there, still red, still the same tree. Reginald had planted as a sapling the year we moved in, when Tamara was just 3 years old and the yard was nothing but mud. By 7 o'clock I had made a list. I am a practical woman. I was an office administrator for 28 years. I managed budgets and schedules and personnel files, and I never missed a deadline in my career. I know how to make lists. I know how to look at a problem plainly and decide what needs to be done. I called my bank at 8 o'clock when they opened. I canceled the shared household card and requested a new one issued only in my name. I asked them to review any recent changes to my accounts and to add an additional security step for any future changes. Then I drove to a branch on Lakeshore Road and I sat down with an advisor and I went through everything. Not just the credit card, but all of it. The accounts, the automatic payments, the beneficiary designations. I wanted to understand exactly where I stood. What I found was not catastrophic, but it was clarifying. The advisor, a woman perhaps 10 years younger than me, patient and thorough, helped me reorganize things. We moved certain funds. We updated certain designations. She asked, gently, whether I had considered speaking with a family lawyer, and I said I would think about it. I was already thinking about it. On the way home, I stopped at the Fortinos. I bought orange juice. I also bought a small pot of chrysanthemums for the front step, because I had been meaning to, and because the season doesn't last long. That afternoon, I sat down with my daughter at the kitchen table while Derek was at work, and my grandson was napping. I had a cup of tea. I asked Tamara if she wanted one. She said no. I told her what I had found on the statement. I told her about the card, and what Derek had said at dinner, and how I had felt sitting on the edge of my bed afterward. I told her that I had been to the bank. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I spoke to her the way I would speak to anyone I was trying to be honest with. Tamara didn't say anything for a long time. She wrapped both hands around her mug. She'd taken the tea after all, and she looked out the window at the backyard. She said, "I didn't know about the furniture charge." I said, "I believe you." She said, "I knew about the restaurant." I said, "I know." There was a silence, the kind that has a lot of things in it. Then she said, "Mom, I think we've let it go too far." I said, "Yes." She said, "Derek told me we were handling things. He said it was all going to get sorted out. He kept saying we just needed a bit more time." I said, "How much time do you think?" She didn't answer that right away. She looked at her hands. Then she said, "I think I've been letting him do the thinking for both of us, and I think I let you carry things that I should have been paying attention to." I didn't say anything to that. Sometimes the right thing is to let the words sit where they land. She said she was sorry. She said it more than once, and the second time her voice broke a little, and I put my hand on top of hers. What happened after that was not quick. I want to be truthful about that, because I think people sometimes imagine these things resolve themselves tidily, in a single afternoon. They don't. Derek was not pleased. When he came home and understood what had changed, the card, the accounts, and the conversation I had had with Tamara, he was cold and clipped and spent most of the evening in the basement. He said things to Tamara later that she told me about afterward, things about how I had overreacted and how he had always planned to pay it back, and how this was typical of the way I had always made Tamara feel guilty. I did not respond to those things directly. I had been a mother for 43 years. I knew what it looked like when someone was trying to make someone else feel responsible for a problem that person had created. I spoke with a family lawyer the following week, a straightforward, no-nonsense woman in a downtown Hamilton office who listened to everything I told her and helped me understand my options clearly. I updated my will. I put certain assets into a structure that would be more difficult to access in ways I had not intended. She said it was smart to do this regardless of the circumstances, and she was right. Tamara and Derek found a rental unit in Hamilton in December, a 2-bedroom on the east end of the city, not luxurious but reasonable, in the way that most things are when you actually start looking. The moving day was a Saturday. I helped Tamara pack the kitchen. We wrapped the mugs in newspaper the way I had wrapped mugs when Reginald and I moved into our first apartment 40 years ago in Guelph. We didn't talk much, but it was a comfortable quiet. Derek carried boxes without looking at me. I didn't push for anything more than that. My grandson waved at me from the back seat of the car as they drove away. He pressed his small hand flat against the window, and I stood on the front step next to the pot of chrysanthemums that had dried and gone stiff in the November cold, and I waved back. That evening I walked through the house slowly, room by room. I moved Reginald's bookshelves back to the living room. They had been in the garage. Some of his books had gotten damp, and I set those aside. But most of them were fine. I made a cup of tea and sat in my chair by the window. The maple had lost its leaves by then. The backyard was bare and brown, and the sky above it was that particular gray that means winter is on its way. Not threatening, exactly, just certain. Just the way things are in Ontario in late November. I thought about all the things I had let slide because I didn't want to seem difficult. I thought about how easy it is at 67 to convince yourself that keeping the peace is the same as preserving the relationship. It isn't. I understand that now. I thought about Reginald, who had been practical and kind, and who had never, in 34 years, made me feel that my discomfort was an inconvenience. I thought about my grandson, who is 2 years old and has absolutely no responsibility for any of this, and who I intend to know very well. Tamara calls me on Sunday evenings now. We talk for a long time, the way we used to when she was in university, and I would sit on the kitchen counter and talk to her for an hour after dinner. She is figuring things out. It is not easy, and I am not pretending it is. But I think she is doing it with her eyes open now, which is the only way it is ever really done. There are things I wish had gone differently. I wish I had set clearer expectations in March when they first arrived. I wish I had said at the beginning that we should talk about how this would work. A timeline, a contribution to the household, some structure around the shared finances. I was trying to be generous, and I confused generosity with the absence of limits. Those are not the same thing, and I am old enough to know better. What I know now, sitting in this chair in this house, with Reginald's books back on the shelf, and a fresh pot of tea on the counter, and the backyard gray and quiet outside my window, is this: your home is not a proof of your love. Your money is not a measure of your devotion. You can give freely and still expect to be treated with dignity. These things are not contradictions. Dignity is not something that is taken from you by someone else's behavior. It is something you return to when you are ready, when you remember where you left it. I found mine at 5:30 in the morning at a kitchen table in October, watching the sky go from black to gray to gold. I've kept it close ever since.